Well, what is happening, y'all? So, I'm going to continue with my fundamental strength training series, and today we're going to cover the deadlift. So, similar to what I was talking about in the squat, how to squat video, two of the key things with the deadlift is breathing and bracing. Now, again, I have covered that in the squat video, although I again will cover it here, probably just a wee bit quicker. So the biggest thing I think when it comes to deadlifting and performing it correctly and safely as well is, first things first, is learning the actual biomechanics of it. So before I even go near the bar, what I want to show you is the hip hinge, which is a fundamental movement pattern when it comes to strength training. So obviously we've touched on the squat. The deadlift is a hip hinge movement, and along with your horizontal row, vertical row, your bench press, horizontal press, vertical press, obviously the vertical press being the overhead press, horizontal press being the bench press. Those are the fundamental movement patterns of strength training. So with the hip hinge, the key, I like to use two different cues to cue the hip hinge with clients when I'm working with them. Two key cues, just to help you learn what the hip hinge is, because it is imperative that you do the hip hinge correctly, because if you don't do it correctly, then you're likely to, it's likely to result in form breakdown. And again, I'm sure many of you know, if your form breaks down, that's where your likelihood of injury increases exponentially. So first off, what is the hip hinge? So take a few paces back. The easiest way I found to cue the hip hinge for clients and anybody who asks about it would be place one hand on your stomach like this. At the same time, you're going to place one hand just there on your back. Now, I will show from the side, front and back what this looks like. So what you essentially do, and this obviously would be at the start of the deadlift when you're setting up, is to get into the hinge, you want to push your stomach in, and at the same time use this back arm to fold yourself over, as you can see, into this position. What it looks like from the side, from here, front hand's pushing in, back arm is going to fold you over, like this. So you've got this slight bend in the knees, and that's when you know you're in the hip hinge. Your back is neutral, straight. Similar whenever you're doing the back of the row, this is what we want to look like. We don't want to be like this. We don't want the round of the back. Whenever you start to round your back, on the deadlift, on the hip hinge, that's where, honestly, that's where most injuries occur, when you're rounding your back. Rounding the back is just your body's way of compensating. It's often either due to poor technique or you're lifting a weight that you have no business lifting. Naturally, of course, even if you're an experienced strength training athlete or weightlifter, naturally enough, like I talked about this in the squat, like no one's form is going to be pitch perfect, but you certainly can have really good form, even lifting very, very heavy weights. And for me, that is key for longevity, is to teach the actual biomechanics of the movement, really ingrain it in the clients, like this is the way you're supposed to look whenever you're doing the deadlift. Because again, like the squat, the deadlift and the squat are for sure like the two lifts that you're most likely to get injured doing, because you're going to be lifting the most weight. Probably the deadlift's probably the number one, because out of all the lifts, out of the big four lifts, the compounds, the deadlift is going to be the lift that you lift the most weight typically. So again, and even the intro from the back, so you fold yourself over just like that. So there is another cue that I would use for clients. I don't really think it's as good as the fold yourself over cue, but listen, if this one resonates with you more, go ahead. So I would say to clients, imagine you're playing American football before the game gets going. I don't know what the fuck they call it, but more to the point and more relevant, and probably what I know better would be rugby in the scrum. So you imagine at the very start when players are like this, just imagine or even wrestling, if you're a fan of wrestling, not the fucking fake shit, the real wrestling. In this position, whenever you're getting ready to shoot for a double leg or go for a single leg, this here position is what we want. See this, again, straight back, neutral spine. So the first cue I prefer, I think it is more effective and more straightforward as well. So that is the biomechanics of the hip hinge. Now, obviously I will show what that looks like when you actually set up with the bar. So, adjusting the camera here. So, I'm going to cover two things when it comes to the deadlift. This really does boil down to personal preference, it's stances. Now, I teach my clients both the conventional stance and the sumo stance. Now, typically what I would do is the first session of the day deadlift, I try and work out with the client, if they haven't done deadlifting before, what is their safest, strongest, most secure deadlift stance. Again, there is no right or wrong way when it comes to deadlifting in terms of stance. People will argue the conventional stance, Mark Ripito, for example, would say that the conventional stance is better than the sumo because, in his view, the sumo actually reduces the range of motion. I would disagree with that. I don't really think it significantly reduces the range of motion, but again, what do I know? But me personally, I use the sumo stance, but here's a key thing for anybody watching this who really wants to get strong at the deadlift. If you want to get strong at the deadlift, you got to be practicing both stances. So what I would typically do is I would do my warm-up sets, my lightest working sets with the conventional stance, doing a lot of variation work with your pause reps, your deficits, which I'll probably cover in a later video. But this is just the fundamental series and teaching you how to, first off, just do the deadlift. Let's forget about all the bells and whistles and all the fancy stuff, we'll save that for later. So again, work out what your best stance is, your strongest stance. And also, confidence is a big thing. Like, what do you feel most comfortable in? Everybody's hip structure is different. I don't know why. For me, sumo stance just seems far more natural, far more comfortable. I feel strong as fuck in that stance as well. But again, like I said, I only reserve my sumo stance for my heaviest sets, and then when I'm hopefully doing powerlifting competitions this year, I'll obviously be pulling sumo. So I will demonstrate the deadlift from both the conventional stance and the sumo stance. So first things first is setup. The setup is so key, so fucking key when it comes to the deadlift. You see people doing touch and go deadlifts, and unless you're a very experienced strength training athlete or weightlifter, don't be fucking doing that. It's stupid. Don't be doing it because you don't know how to. You need to learn how to correctly reset at the bottom of the deadlift. That is so key because whenever you touch and go deadlift, you might be out of the correct alignment and correct position to do the deadlift, and that will result most likely in form and technique breakdown. So with the conventional stance, what you want to do is cut your feet in half, just like that. Now, the conventional stance is shoulder width stance. So from here, what you want to do is obviously get in your hip hinge. Now, from this position, when you're in the hip hinge, you want then to grab. Now, this is grip. So grip is another thing. So I teach my clients the overhand grip. First things first. You will naturally find as you get stronger at the deadlift, you will have to switch to a mixed grip because the overhand grip, again, is not necessarily the strongest grip unless you use a hook grip, and that can be uncomfortable for people. But when you're beginning, use the overhand grip as much as you possibly can and then revert to the mixed grip. For example, I always use the overhand grip in my lightest working sets, my warm-ups, and then when I need to, I will switch over to the mixed grip because the mixed grip is a stronger grip, but you're more likely to actually injure yourself. You're more likely to tear a bicep if you use the mixed grip. The overhand grip is a great grip builder as well. So use it as much as you can and then revert to the mixed grip. So I will just simply use the overhand grip, but I'll also demonstrate the mixed. So you get into position. So hand position is just on the outside of the legs like this. Now, the key thing when you deadlift is you want to bring your lats down and into the pockets. Lats are out the party. That's the cue I always say. Lats are out the party. Lats want to be sitting in your hip socket, like that. Try and imagine you're trying to pull yourself down into the bar. That's the best way I can describe it. So from here, you're in your hip hinge. Lats into the pockets. Lats are squeezed and engaged. You're going to take a big, deep breath. Drive. Reset, bring the bar back close to you. The bar should be scraping your knees. You're going to bring your lats down again and pull yourself into the bar. Another key thing is when you come up with the deadlift, look up to the ceiling. Don't be looking down here. Head position is always rising up. Now, that's conventional. The sumo is a wide stance grip. There's a wide stance. Kind of like a sumo wrestler. So, again, it depends on the person. You can go very fucking wide. You can go outside the Olympic rings on the bar. I typically like to go to the rings, or maybe just on the inside. But from here, it's more or less the same setup. You're going to get into your hinge. You're going to take your overhand grip the bar on the inside. So remember that you're gripping from the inside. From here, same applies. You're going to bring your lats down into the pocket. Big deep breath. Belly action as you come up. Reset. And there. So, what else should I cover? That is more or less it when it comes to the deadlift. Again, be careful with it. Find the stance that is most comfortable, safest and strongest. Technique first and foremost. Make sure you reset at the bottom of the deadlift every single rep. It doesn't matter if it takes you 5 seconds to reset. Guess what? You're not going to lose strength. So many people I've trained, for example, think, oh, I need to be quick. I need to be quick at the bottom. I need to get it done. No, you're not going to lose strength. You're not going to be able to do the lift. Take your time, reset, bring the bar close to you if it gets away from you. Big deep breath, get back in position, go. Doesn't matter if it takes 5 seconds. Doesn't even matter if it takes 10 seconds. So, the mixed grip, sorry, that's the only other thing. 1 overhand grip, 1 supine, and that's the way you lift. In terms of anything else, if you get up in your strength when it comes to deadlift, you can start using things like chalk to improve your grip. Like I touched on earlier, incorporating variation work when you establish a decent level of foundational strength through pause reps, through deficits, is a great way of getting past plateaus and really strengthening your overall deadlift. But again, those are, I would argue, more advanced techniques. I would typically like clients to build a decent level of foundational strength on the deadlift before they start doing the variation work. But again, that's the deadlift. There is probably more to it than that, but I'll cover more of it in later videos, and that is part 2 of the strength training fundamental series that I'm doing. Boom.